another Marvel Monday, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the X-Men animated series Jubilee from Hasbro. By this point, if you've seen any of my other videos in this series looking at the X-Men animated series in the Marvel Legends line, you'll know what to expect. Hasbro have essentially taken a figure that's already been released, repainted it, and given it an animated style. Sometimes they come with new accessories or have very slight tweaks to the sculpting. In the case of Jubilee though, she's only been released once previously, back in that Caliban wave. And she was actually pretty difficult to track down at the time, so this re-release is actually quite welcome, simply to have another chance to pick up a Jubilee. Now, this original release obviously came with the Caliban bath part, but it also included an extra head. This head with the blowing bubblegum effect is not included in this animated version, but she does have a couple of extras all her own. But let's start with the packaging. As you will know by now, they have opted for this VHS style for the packaging. I really love this effect. I think this works really, really well. It's a bit of a novelty, but it's a really fun one, and it's quite collector friendly. First of all, of course, we have this fantastic image, which I think is brand new. I think this is commissioned for this artwork, for this packaging, which is great. It's a really action-packed image. Obviously, in the danger room here, it's bright, it's colourful, and it perfectly sums up the character and the animated series. I think this is really fun. If we look at the side panel again, we can see some of the classic imagery here is what we'd expect on a VHS cassette, which is brilliant. I'm really quite a fan of this approach all in all. I think it's very, very fun, especially when you start stacking them up against other figures in the collection, as we can see here. This just looks really colourful, it looks really interesting. We get to see all the characters' heads all looking in the same direction. It's consistent, it's colourful, it's entertaining, and you can put these on display and it looks fantastic on the shelf. My only gripe with this packaging for this series all in all is the reverse of the packaging. It falls down a little bit. There's an awful lot of small print. In fact, 1/3 of the packaging is dedicated to just bits of information which we're never going to look at or read, to be honest. The top 2/3, there is a nice, big, bright, brilliant image of the Jubilee figure, although this is a digitally rendered image of the figure, not a photo of the figure itself. I don't mind. It still looks really, really good, but it just feels a little bit lacking somehow, just a little bit less dynamic than what we see on the front or the side panel of this packaging. There's a little bit of bio in different languages, of course, on the left hand side. I think this is absolutely fine. It's not the side you're going to want to put on display though. It's definitely going to be all about the front. So moving on to the figure itself, well, there's no surprises for anyone who's already bought the previous Caliban Wave Jubilee. It is the same sculpt and the same figure. However, you will notice the paint scheme is brightened up considerably. Now, this is the standard head that comes on the figure when you open up the packaging. In terms of the sculpting, I'm not hugely impressed with it. I don't hate it at all. I do really like that she's got the earrings there, which look really cool. But I think there's nothing particularly wrong with this face in particular. I think it's more to do with the hairline. If we look at the still from the animated series, we can see obviously that her hairline is a little bit more wild, it's a little bit more spiky, I think, whereas here they've definitely emulated that. It's got that look and feel, but it doesn't look quite accurate to me, and overall I think it just throws off the entire portrait. So this isn't as sharp as I would like. Now, this head is recycled from the original Caliban Wave release, so that sculpt was aiming to be much more accurate to the comic books of the 90s, the Jim Lee style, much more so than the animated series. But that being said, I do think this body sculpting is pretty much pitch perfect, and it might actually be unique to this character because it's a little bit thinner than the standard female body that we've seen for the Marvel Legends line, so I could be wrong on that, but this looks very different to what I've seen previously, and I think it works really well. The coat that she comes with is a soft rubber, so it is pretty flexible, although rigid enough to hold its shape. And aside from being brightened up generally all over with the paint applications, you'll also see there is, of course, that shading on the arms, on the top of the chest there, on the gloves, and even on the pants as well. We can see there's that animated style shading, which gives it that flavour, which is pretty cool. And likewise, we can see that running all through the figure, right the way down to the boots. And I think with the shading, this is something that can be hit or miss depending on how thick and where they've placed it. But I think on Jubilee, this works really quite well pretty much everywhere, to be honest. There's no real surprises when it comes to articulation. She does have a ball joint in the head, of course, so she can spin the head 360 degrees, and she can look up and down a pretty healthy distance as well. She also has ball joints in the shoulders, that means the arms can kick up and out, which is great, and this is complemented with a pin swivel at the elbow, so that lower arm can rotate 360 degrees, and of course it will hinge to a full 90 degrees as well. Then there's another pin swivel at the wrist, so again, that wrist can rotate all the way around, and it will also hinge from side to side. Now she does have this ab joint at the top of her chest here, so she can move from side to side, and she can lean from side to side a little bit as well, not a huge range there, and she can bend forwards and backwards ever so slightly. She's got these hinged hips, so the legs do kick out to the side. It can look a little bit unsightly with that bar at the top there, but you can get away with that. She does have a thigh swivel at the top there, and she also has a swivel at the boot cut as well in the lower leg of the calf, which is pretty cool. Now, these legs also kick forwards, as you would hope, and they go back to, well, a little bit back, not a huge amount. She does have double jointed knees, which is great, so if you wanted, you could get these legs to kick all the way back. You're going to have some resistance there with that coat though, so you're going to have to be careful. And then she does have a pivot at the ankle, so that foot can hinge forwards and backwards and lean from side to side. She also comes packed with quite a few goodies as well, including a pair of solid painted shades, another pair of shades, but this time they are translucent, so you can put these and you can see her eyes underneath, which is pretty cool. She comes with an alternate head, which has the shades sculpted in. This is a brand new sculpt for this release. And she also comes with some effects to put on her arms, which would replicate her fireworks powers. And here we can see her different looks and how these shades work on these different sculpts. So obviously with the translucent shades, we can see her eyes underneath, which look really good. Alternatively, you can opt for the solid shades, which I think look a little bit brighter, a little bit more effective actually, surprisingly, although I do really like having the option to have both. And here she is, of course, with the shades sculpted into the headpiece, resting on her head. And I have to say, I much prefer the hair on this. This definitely feels much more like the animated series, which is cool. So I actually really like this head sculpt. This is probably my favourite of the two. So, time to draw conclusions. Well, overall, I really like this figure an awful lot. So I'm going to give it 4 stars. Now, some of this is tinged by the fact that this is a pretty difficult release to get hold of first time around, and I think it's fantastic we actually have a second chance to get a hold of this character. All in all, the figure itself is really nicely made. I can't really fault it when it comes to the sculpt. I think it's excellently articulated. There's plenty of opportunities to create all sorts of dynamic poses and displays with this character, so I think the figure looks fantastic. I think it moves really, really well. The only criticism I would have of the articulation would be that the hip joints are just a little bit unsightly. There's that gap there between the top of the thigh and the crotch, and you can see that bar running through it, which is a bit distracting, a little bit off-putting. But other than that, I think this is a really well articulated figure and really fun. As I said, I really like the colouring. I really love the brighter colours. This animated style is fantastic. The shading works really well in this figure, I think, overall. And I think they've done a pretty good job. In terms of the extra pieces, I really like that we have a brand new sculpt for the head with those shades sculpted into the top of the hairline there. I much prefer that look to the standard head with the individual shades. It just works better. It's a little bit less clumsy, and it looks closer to the animated series than the initial portrait. So really like this a lot. If I was being critical, it would have been nice if we'd had the bubblegum sculpt. I think that was really key character component. Would have been really nice to see that here. And I have to admit, I'm not a huge fan of the effects they've given her for her wrists. I'm glad to have them, but it doesn't really properly replicate her fireworks powers at all. I mean, these are things that would fire out from her fingertips. They didn't swirl around her arms like some mystical mist a la Doctor Strange or the Scarlet Witch. But all in all, a very nice addition to this animated series line, a very key, important character to this lineup as well, and looks really good with the other figures in this collection so far. So I think this is another winner for this line, and I'm very, very happy with it. So I'm slowly but surely being won over to this animated series subline from Marvel Legends. Always really love that series, and these figures look fantastic. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.